Good evening. One subject that comes up every now and then that people ask me is what the average lifespan, or how long do Bigfoots live? And like most things in life, just about everything in life, there is no simple answer, especially because there's just so many variables and different varieties and different types and different climates, from the hot, humid swamps to the frozen tundra to the deserts, and all the different types of Bigfoot, from the big patty types to the smaller, more chimp wood booger like, to the more relic hominid looking ones, to the very rare ones with like a protruding snout. Now, it's not uncommon over the years for people to have witnessed white Bigfoots or Bigfoots of graying, or even have kind of a silverback tone to them. Or people have seen them up close and they can attest to the wrinkles around their eyes, the gray of some of their hair, and scars on them, and possibly even missing teeth, people have reported. And, like an old haggard, weathered Bigfoot. So it was a few months back. I joined Wood Booger Farm. Rick, he's an excellent YouTube channel. You guys should check him out. And he's got Bigfoot activity on his property, and he was doing a live stream. And he asked, or somebody asked, how long they live. And I said, well, they probably live somewhat close to human range, 50, 60, 70 years probably in some situations. And he said, oh, no, I think they live much shorter lives, which I can kind of present an argument for both sides. I really see that. Because he said, they live a hard life out there in the bush and probably go days without water or days without food. And certain times a year, it's probably feast or famine, just like for most animals. But I think these things are pretty resilient. I'm not saying all of them. And I'm not saying that all of them do live, 60, maybe even 70 years. But I think they probably have the capacity to live that long. And then under the right conditions, if they live maybe an area that doesn't get too hot, doesn't get too cold, with ample water source around year round, and different seasonal type foods where they can eat berries and roots and stuff certain times a year, and they can hunt deer reliably, and maybe even other animals, and maybe even fish, and eat crawdads and all that other kind of stuff. So I think if they have a really well-stocked area, maybe even steal food from humans, I think that they could live a long time. I think they could live a really long time, 50, 60 years. And I think as these things get older, the males probably die younger than the females do, because that's always the case, it seems like, because the males are always full of the testosterone and everything else and more prone to fight. And generally bigger animals and bigger species tend to live not as long as smaller ones, even if they are the same species. That's why, little dogs tend to outlive bigger dogs and stuff like that. And these things do get huge. So I think a big male fighting all the time, hunting, protecting the family, clashing with other ones, probably not going to last as long as, say, a female. And there's always stuff that, everybody and everything's prone to, like infections and injuries, or eating something bad, or drinking bad water. I mean, I'm sure they're pretty tough physiology to these things, but they pretty much can succumb to everything else, along with fighting and, the different territorial disputes and all the other stuff that comes with it. But I think especially probably with the older females, I think the clan probably takes care of each other. I think the older ones, if they are injured or can't, necessarily hunt or participate as much, I'm sure they bring food back and share with them, just like they would with the young ones. Like the young and the old, you need to take care of. And I'm sure in certain climates where it gets super cold, 1 and 2 probably go out and go hunting, and probably bring food back. They steal what they can. They steal livestock. They steal whatever they can, deer, and bring it back to the cave for everybody else. No sense in everybody else going out there, probably the biggest, strongest, most well-fed, especially in the winter. But yeah, I think they could probably get really old, because I think they probably take care of each other to a certain degree. Like I said in other videos, though, if none of them have eaten in weeks and they're getting really desperate and hungry and one of them dies, I don't think cannibalism would be past them, like we covered in a video last week. But I think if the conditions are right and there's plenty of food, and the social structure of these things, with mom and dad and a couple babies and maybe some aunts and uncles around and maybe a grandma, so to speak, I think that they would take care of each other. I think maybe while mom and dad are out hunting or watching the older kids, maybe grandma's back at the cage with some of the young squatchlings. Anyway, I think it's entirely possible that they do take care of each other and at least share resources to a certain extent. And I think that they could end up living a long time. Now, that being said, down in the south, in the desert areas, where maybe they have to migrate a lot, 25, 30 years is not out of the question. I mean, humans generally, we've been living longer and longer, but even through history, um, 50, 60, years was considered pretty normal lifespan for a long time for humans. And now people live well into their 90s because of medical science and health. And generally, we live a very safe lifestyle these days with humans. But we know that we could go back in time, 1,000 years ago, take a human, transplant him into modern time, and he would probably live 70, 80, 90 years. The physiology is the same. It's just the danger factor. So I think if you had a Sasquatch in captivity, it would probably live a very long time, pretty comparable to humans, I think. Probably a little less just because, like I said, massive animals tend to not live as long. But maybe they have something else in them that we don't understand. I think there's a lot we don't understand. If we take a look at Neanderthals, from everything I could research and remembering back, they lived 30 to 50 years. And they had the capacity to take care of their older ones and ones that, maybe didn't have any teeth. They found, maybe softer fruits and things to eat and mash things up. And, they were very smart. And I think Sasquatch is probably just as smart, if not smarter, than a Neanderthal, which is very close to us. So I think it was very interesting, and they lived in the wild. They didn't have technology. They had primitive medicine. I'm sure they knew what berries and what plants made them feel better and which ones feel worse, but they certainly didn't have anything like we have today. When we look at chimpanzees, they can live around 50 years, and they live a long time in the wild, and they even show signs of sharing food and bringing fruit back. And, the older males, like I said, tend to die a little bit younger because they battle and they're still dominant, and when they lose that hierarchy. But the females tend to live a long time because they're a little bit more passive and probably a little smarter, if you ask me, to stay out of all the ruckus. But yeah, they have the capacity to share fruit and help things along. And, the biggest, toughest one might be the first one over there, but, the last one's certainly going to find scraps. And if you look at gorillas, which are obviously much bigger than chimpanzees and much bigger than humans, you see the lifespan kind of goes down from there. It goes to 35 to 40 years, and they have a purely plant-based diet. I don't know if gorillas aren't set up for it, but if they had a more higher protein, meat-based diet, if their lifespans would change or increase or decrease, I know the protein would probably sustain, brain function a bit better than a lot of plant life does, because we're discovering that chimpanzees eat a lot of meat. But as you can see, it's very common for both these species to turn gray, to kind of have a graying, just like you see in humans, just like you see in a lot of animals. If you ever had an old dog, they turn gray. So I think it's quite possible. My direct answer would be 50 to 60 years for Bigfoots. I think if they lived to 35 or 40, in some climates, that's probably considered old age. In other parts of the countries, where they're pretty remote and have a great source and a pretty mild climate, I think they could live 50, 60 years. I think if you had them in captivity, they could probably live 70 years. Probably wouldn't be too happy about the captivity, and good luck trying to contain one being as smart as they are. But that's going to be my official answer, 50, 60, in some cases even 70 years. But I think, and there's been a lot of reports of people who've had habituation sites, people on their property who've reported for many years, 20, 30 years, kids growing up that are grown, telling about the same Bigfoot they've seen their whole lives, or family groups, or reporting pregnant ones. So I think it's fairly comparable to humans, like if you had a feral human out in the woods. So anyway, that's how I wanted to answer this question. I think it's 50 or 60 years, give or take, maybe a few either way. But it's purely probably dependent on where they are. If you like this video, please give it the thumbs up. It really helps me out. I know people don't like it when people ask for likes and to subscribe, but YouTube's very competitive, and you want those videos to get bumped up in the search results and the algorithm. It's all very complicated. So when you do give this video a thumbs up, it actually helps out this channel a lot. If you give it a share to your Facebook group or your social media or on Twitter, that helps us out as well here. We don't ask for money. We don't do a Patreon or anything like that. We do run ads, but every little bit helps. So please give us a thumbs up if you haven't already. Please subscribe, and thank you very much. Next week's our anniversary week, the 1 week anniversary. I believe it's on next Thursday. will be the 1 year anniversary officially for Mattsquatch Presents, and I'm going to have a very special video I've been working on for you guys, and probably a few other things. Might post a few funny things as well. So stay safe in the woods. Thank you very much, folks.